Hello, and welcome back to Data Visualization using Python. In today's video, the first of Section 2, we're going to take a look at exploring data visualization platforms and methods. In this section, we're going to see why data visualization is such a useful tool and skill, how to use simple line plots to visualize changes over time in unemployment data, and how to use multiple plots to compare and contrast different quantities that we might be interested in. In the first video, we're going to look a little bit at the theory of why we visualize data. In this video, we'll talk about why plots are important for interpreting complex data sets, how to choose appropriate plots for a given kind of data set, and understand the limits of information visualization. A real background in the theory of visualization. So you probably always think about this question when it comes to data visualization because it's a complicated task. Why bother plotting? Well, really, whether or not plotting and visualization is worth doing ultimately comes down to how much data we're dealing with, whether that's 1 data point, 10 data points, 100, and so on. Larger data points are harder to visualize just by looking at numbers. And as I mentioned earlier, this comes down to basic psychological, really neurological limitations in human memory. We really can't work with quantities greater than a handful. You can't look at 100 numbers and just by seeing those numbers visualize the relationships between them. The other reason visualization is really important is that most data has dimension to it. It's not just a collection of numbers. It's actually collections of sets of numbers with relationships between them, whether that be something like an unemployment percentage as a function of time, whether that be alcohol usage in different geographical distributions. Most data actually has multiple dimensions to it. And when it comes down to visualizing, we actually only have a handful of dimensions to work with in order to visualize multidimensional data. We have the position of our data points or our curves, we have the color and opacity of our data points, and we have the shape or pattern of markers, lines, or curves. So for a simple set of data, a pair of points, x versus y, something like a simple scatter plot here can use the position data to characterize that x and y data. We can move to adding a third dimension in color, visualize 3 different dimensions of data. In this case, x, y, and z, where the z coordinate is represented not by where the point is, but by what color it has. And finally, we can add a 4th dimension in terms of the shape. And here you can see we have multicolored data on a 2-dimensional plot with different markers. Some of the markers are pentagons, the others are stars. And so you can see we can add more and more complexity to our plots here to show more and more fine-grained details of our data. And that really is what a good plot should do, is that it highlights not just all of the information, but the qualities of the data. What are the trends? What are the important features that the data shows? Qualities aren't properties of individual points. They're properties of the whole data set. What's the scale, the density, the shape, or the modality of the data set? To give you an idea as to what the difference between a good and a bad plot can show you in terms of these qualities of our data set, look at this scatter plot. In the left, you can see a bunch of data points plotted just with a single black point where every piece of data lies, and it looks like just a uniform cloud. But if we instead color the graph by the density of the points, you can see that actually within this area, which looks like just a uniform black cloud, there's actually an increase in density towards the middle. So good data visualization choices, the kinds of things you can learn about in the classic text visual display of quantitative information, or by looking at some of the data visualization failures out there at viz.wtf, can really mean the difference between a complicated, hard to manufacture plot that doesn't actually give the viewer something, and a kind of instant insight that people can get just by looking at your visualization.